In what was the far-off year of 2026 in Metropolis, industrialists and their children live in an incredible city that stretches out into the heavens, while the workers who power the city are forced to live underground. Freder tells his father, the city master, of the harsh conditions of the workers. His father initially ignores him. A woman named Maria tells the workers that a mediator will come who will bring the two classes together. After a series of incidents and sexy robot dancing, Freder fulfills the prophecy by joining his father and the workers together, somehow. What actually happens to them and the distribution of wealth and power is unclear. Yeah, now seems like a good a time as any to discuss Marxist theory as it relates to socio-economic classes. I don't want right-wing Twitter subscribed to my channel anyway. Human beings have not adapted to the natural world in the way that most non-human animals have. A cat in the wilderness for a month might survive. They may chase down mice or other small animals and get by fine. A 21st century unarmed human being would likely perish in the same time frame. The way human beings survive in nature is to change it to better fit our needs. This is labor, and labor requires cooperation. When we freed ourselves from the natural world, we locked ourselves up in a socio-economic prison. Labor creates hierarchies in which some, through good fortune, good ideas, or sometimes hereditary luck, do not have to labor as much as others. Freder is the son of a wealthy man with great power and influence. Freder does not have to labor if he does not want to. He does because, well, it's a movie. In the future of Metropolis, humanity has reached a new mode of production. In Marxist theory, which was gaining popularity around the time of the film's release, a mode of production is a socio-economic system defined by the distribution of its wealth, structure, and classes. For example, feudalism was a mode of production. The primary form of property in feudalism was the possession of land. The ruling class was either nobility or the aristocracy, and a lower class was serfdom. Modes of production change over time, and in Metropolis, we see a new mode of production that appears to be the end result of income inequality and a growing disparity between the rich and poor. A gigantic city for those with means, and an underground city for those without. In feudalism, a nobleman had more rights than a serf. It was usually outlined in a feudal contract. In modernity, at least on paper, a rich person does not have more rights under the law than someone of a lower economic class, but their wealth affords them greater protections, the ability to hire better lawyers, connections within the legal system, connections within the political system and law enforcement. Legal protections are a matter of access. In Metropolis, this disparity is shown in hyperbole, with the rich gaining greater access to the world and the poor losing that same access. The workers operate the underground machines that power the city, and the rich, well, they just own the city. This divides the underground workers and the city dwellers into two classes. The underground workers in Marxist theory would be called the Proletariat, which are defined by the fact that they work and use materials but do not own said materials, the means of production. The city dwellers under Marxist theory would be called the bourgeoisie. Marx differentiated between the petite bourgeoisie, meaning simple merchants, and the haute bourgeoisie, meaning industrialists and financiers. The haute bourgeoisie is defined by the fact that they do own the materials but do not labor to physically create the product, and they control the means of production. It is this difference that leads to exploitation under capitalism. In feudal society, lords could punish serfs if they did not work, instead of just firing them. In modern society, the proletariat may not be paid a living wage for their labors, among other exploitative actions. In Metropolis, the proletariat is forced to live underground, and upon gaining hope, the haute bourgeoisie threatens to undermine them. Not everyone in the proletariat or everyone in the bourgeoisie have the same experiences, of course, but they are lumped into classes due to the potential for class conflict because of the separation of financial and social power. Under Marxist theory, the underground proletariat is being given something for selling their labor to the bourgeoisie. But whatever they are being paid, if they are even being paid at all, the movie is not clear, they are definitely being paid less than the worth of their labor. They are keeping an incredible city moving and functioning, but they are unable to take part in city life. The bourgeoisie, particularly the haute bourgeoisie, want the system to remain in place because it benefits them to do so, and the proletariat do not want the system to remain the same because it does not benefit them. This is called class conflict, sometimes exaggerated to class warfare. The proletariat wants the surplus to benefit themselves. In the case of Metropolis, they want a better life than what is offered to them underground. After all, their labor created said surplus. Forces of production is the combination of the means of labor with human labor power. Relations of production is how people organize themselves around labor. The forces of production, meaning materials and labor, run up against limitations in the relations of production, meaning how labor is organized and compensated. This creates class conflict. Metropolis contains an optimistic, even naive goal for the struggling working class and the upper class. Throughout the film, Freder is seen as a kind of mediator between the two classes. The upper class is seen as the head of their society, the brain. The lower class is seen as the hands, the ones doing the labor. Freder is seen as the heart, the mediator. As the film ends, the phrase, "the mediator between the head and hands must be the heart." From the perspective of the film, the separation between the two socio-economic classes is just a misunderstanding with honest mistakes, and that the joining together of the two is as simple as a handshake. What is Metropolis trying to convey with this handshake? Will Freder's father allow for a greater distribution of the profits of the corporation? Will he recognize the workers as a union? And will said union begin collective bargaining? It is not made clear, but that appears to be intentional. The film recognizes this coming together through the mediator as a kind of spiritual awakening, rather than one that addresses the concerns of the workers. Also, this misrepresents the relationship between the working class and the upper class that has financial control of them, as akin to an older sibling and a younger sibling who do not quite get along but reach a mutual understanding and friendship. The upper class purposefully exploits the labor of lower economic classes. The socio-political subtext of the film is mired in a mixed message. It combines the reality of class struggle and a kind of hopeful sentimentality, not just optimistic but cloying in such a way that it obfuscates the issue. Metropolis seems to suggest that the savior of the worker is a rich man who can come to live with them, and an older, richer man who allows them some semblance of respect. Metropolis frames the coming together of the upper class and the lower class as something similar to the relationship between God and mankind. Freder, the mediator, is a kind of Christ figure. The struggle is likened to the Book of Revelation in the film. The Tower of Babel is referenced, man's previous monument to its own hubris. The machine woman is a tempter, drawing parallels to the whore of Babylon. By infusing the plot with religious imagery, the narrative speaks to the audience through its collective myths and stories, but it also deifies the upper class and shows a coming together as ordained by God. This is misleading because it suggests that the upper class and the lower class have the same goals. The upper class wants to exploit the lower class. The lower class wants to survive. The idea that a rich son who never worked an honest day in his life is the true hero and would gladly trade his life for someone in the lower class is not only a fairy tale, but also a little insulting in its disingenuousness. Also, the workers' revolt, what Marx would call a revolution, is not framed as a positive. The workers are deceived by the false Maria, the android. A Marxist view of history is that modes of production eventually lead to class conflict, which leads to revolution, which leads to a new mode of production. In Metropolis, the revolution is false, and the workers are ultimately proven as wrong as the bourgeoisie. What Metropolis gets right about class conflict is the disparity between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, although it neglects to explain the actual economics of this system. What it gets wrong about class conflict is why and how the conflict begins in the first place. Hi everyone. If you like what I do, please click on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also how you can request an episode. There are also a lot of other perks for being a patron, so check it out. The information is on my Patreon page. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next week.